The marble countertop was cold under her palms. Vivian noticed that every morning, the specific chill of it against the heels of her hands as she stood over the kitchen island, sorting through the week's documents before the city outside the floor-to-ceiling windows had fully committed to being awake. 31st floor, Lincoln Park. The lake was a gray sheet in the November light, flat and indifferent. And the coffee in her mug had gone cold 20 minutes ago because she kept forgetting to drink it. She was reviewing a zoning variance filing for a property on South Wabash. Robert's name was in the signature block. It was always Robert's name in the signature block. She had drafted it. She had identified the variance pathway, cross-referenced the municipal code, and written the argument in 4 hours on a Tuesday while Robert was at lunch at Gibson's. He had read it once, signed it without changing a word, and emailed it to the city attorney's office with a note that said, "Thoughts?" She set it to the side of the stack and reached for the coffee. The front door opened at 7:42. Robert came in from his morning walk with the particular energy of a man who had already solved himself for the day. Collar up on his coat, cheeks red from the lake wind, phone already in his hand. "The alderman's office called," he said, not looking up. "The South Wabash filing, they want a follow-up brief on the environmental impact section. He'll have it by Thursday. Good." He set his phone on the island, picked it back up, set it down again. He glanced at the stack of documents she had sorted. "You're up early, I'm always up early, right?" He poured himself coffee. "Henderson's bringing his wife to the reception Friday. He'll need you there. You know how Carol gets when she doesn't have someone to talk to." She looked at him. "I'm already planning to be there, Robert." I know. He waved a hand. Not dismissive, or not intentionally. Just moving on. Already somewhere else? "I told him you'd help coordinate the seating. You're good at that." She turned back to the documents. That was when his phone rang. He answered it, still standing at the island, and she heard him say it. Not to her, to whoever was on the other end, Henderson probably, or one of the attorneys from the Riverside Project. She heard him laugh first, that easy laugh he used for men he was trying to impress. No, he said. "Vivian handles that side of things. She doesn't really work. She just helps out." The coffee mug was smooth and slightly warm in her hand. She did not put it down. She did not turn around. She stood at the kitchen island on the 31st floor of a building she had helped finance. Holding a filing she had written, listening to her husband explain her to someone she would probably seat at the correct table on Friday night. She just helps out. If this story is landing somewhere real for you right now, I want you to know you are not alone. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the rest of Vivian's story. And drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, how old you are, what time it is where you are right now. I read every single one, and sometimes the comments become the most important part of this whole thing. Now back to Vivian. She set the mug down. At the far end of the kitchen, near the hallway that led to the guest rooms no one used, their daughter Claire was standing in the doorway in her coat, keys in her hand, ready to leave for work. She had heard everything, the way Claire looked at her. Not with pity. Something worse than pity, something closer to recognition and grief mixed together, was the thing that followed Vivian down the hall 20 minutes later, after Robert had left and the apartment had gone quiet, and she found herself standing in the utility room in front of a banker's box she had not opened in 11 years. Her hand rested on the lid. She did not lift it. Not yet. The utility room smelled like cardboard and old tape, and the particular staleness of things that have not been disturbed in a long time. Vivian stood there in her socks on the concrete floor, the overhead light humming its single flat note, and looked at the box the way you look at something you have been carefully not looking at for years. It was a standard banker's box, the kind with the removable lid. And someone, she had done this herself, had written MISC 1999 on the side in black marker. Neat handwriting, deliberate. She lifted the lid. The leather portfolio was on top, exactly where she had left it. Black, slim, the kind law firms gave associates who made partner track. She had bought this one herself, actually, at a shop on Wabash, the week she won the Meridian case. The week she was 38 years old and the managing partner had pulled her into his office and said words she had not let herself remember in a very long time. She picked it up. The leather was still soft, that surprised her. Inside, behind the bar card, and the brief and the offer letter she had never signed. There was a photograph she had forgotten was there. A conference room, fluorescent light, 4 attorneys around a table, and her at the head of it, mid-sentence, one hand flat on a stack of documents. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She had been 37 in that photograph. She stood in the utility room and held it, and remembered the exact Tuesday evening Robert had come to pick her up from the office. This was before they were married, barely. They had been engaged 4 months, and she had been in the middle of the Meridian deposition prep, and she had said, without really thinking about it, "I can't leave yet." And he had stood in the doorway of her office with his coat on and his hands in his pockets and said, quietly, the way he said things when he meant them, "I need a partner, Viv. Not a competitor." She had laughed. She had thought he was joking. He had not been joking. She set the photograph back in the portfolio and closed it, and stood very still in the cold utility room, and felt the full weight of the math she had been refusing to do for 19 years, the zoning filings, the permit applications, the liability assessments, the contract language, the environmental briefs, all of it written by her, signed by him, credited to no one, remembered by no one. She just helps out. The word landed somewhere below her sternum, and stayed there. Not hot, not sharp, just heavy, the way a stone is heavy when you finally stop pretending it isn't in your hand. She carried the portfolio out of the utility room and set it on the kitchen island next to the cold mug and the South Wabash filing, and stood there for a moment in the empty apartment. Then she opened her laptop. She did not think about what she was doing. She had learned a long time ago that thinking too much about a motion before you filed it was how you lost. You trusted your preparation. You trusted your argument. You moved. She typed a name into the search bar. Simone Carter, Chicago Tribune, Housing and Development. The byline came up immediately. 14 articles in the last 18 months. 3 of them about Southside development irregularities. One of them, she leaned closer to the screen, cited a zoning variance on a South Lawndale property that she recognized. The language in the city's response letter. She had written that language. Her hand was steady on the trackpad. She clicked on the contact link. She began to type. Outside, the lake had gone from gray to white, and the November wind was pressing against the glass like it wanted in, and Vivian Harmon was sitting at her kitchen island writing an email that Robert did not know about to a woman who had been asking questions nobody had been willing to answer. Until now, the fundraiser at the Langham was Robert's natural habitat. Vivian watched him from across the room on Thursday evening, watched him the way she had stopped allowing herself to watch him for years, with her professional eyes instead of her married ones, and what she saw was a performance so well rehearsed he had forgotten it was a performance. He moved through the room with his hand extended, his laugh landing exactly where it needed to, his name in everyone's mouth before he reached them. The chandeliers caught his cufflinks. His suit was the right suit. He said the right things to the right alderman and touched the right shoulders and accepted a drink he would not finish, because finishing it was not the point. She stood near the windows with a glass of sparkling water and thought about filing deadlines. He found her once, briefly, when Henderson's wife cornered him near the bar and he needed an exit. "There she is," he said, steering Carol Henderson gently in Vivian's direction. "You two should talk. Vivian knows everyone here." He smiled at Vivian over Carol's shoulder, grateful, distracted, already scanning the room. "You good?" "Fine," she said. He was gone before Carol had finished saying hello. Vivian smiled and asked Carol about her grandchildren and heard none of the answer. 2 days later, she was sitting in a window booth at a diner on North Clark Street across from Simone Carter, who had responded to her email within 4 hours and suggested they meet somewhere that was not a Tribune conference room. Simone was 44 and had the particular stillness of someone who had learned to make other people comfortable enough to keep talking. She ordered black coffee and did not open a notebook. She just looked at Vivian across the Formica table and said, "Tell me what you know." So Vivian told her, "Not everything, not yet. Enough." She watched Simone's expression move through several careful adjustments as she spoke. Recognition, calculation, something that was almost anger, but more controlled than that. Simone set her coffee cup down and said, "The South Lawndale filing. That language in Section 4, I flagged it 8 months ago because it was too precise. Too clean. I've been looking for whoever actually wrote it." Vivian opened her bag and set the portfolio on the table. Simone looked at it, then she looked at Vivian. "How long?" She said, 19 years. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, and the radiator under the window was knocking steadily, and Vivian felt something in her chest that she did not name but that had been absent for a very long time. Something like altitude, like standing on solid ground after years of standing on something that moved. They worked for 6 days. Vivian moved through documents the way she had moved through them at 37, without hesitation, without second-guessing, pulling threads and following them to their ends. She reconstructed the authorship trail on 11 filings. She annotated her own drafts with dates and version notes. She built the kind of brief that does not argue. It simply demonstrates, clearly and completely, and lets the evidence speak at a volume that does not require raising. On the 6th day, Simone called and said, "The City Council ceremony. Civic Builder Award. Robert's receiving it Friday. They're going to enter the lakefront development documentation into the public record during the presentation." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. "The documentation includes—" "I know what it includes," Vivian said. "I wrote it." She ended the call and stood in the bedroom and opened the closet door and pushed past Robert's suits and her own careful neutrals until her hand found the garment bag at the very back, the one she had not unzipped in 11 years. She pulled it out and laid it on the bed and drew the zipper down slowly. The charcoal wool jacket inside was exactly as she had left it. She pressed her palm flat against the lapel. It still fit the shape of who she had been. The question, the only question that had ever mattered, was whether that woman was still in there. She lifted the jacket off the hanger. Simone was waiting in the lobby of the building on Friday morning when Vivian came out of the elevator. She watched Vivian cross the marble floor and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "There you are. Not you look beautiful, not you look different. There you are." The cab driver glanced in the rearview mirror when they got in, and then glanced again. The second look involuntary. The kind people give to someone who occupies space with authority. Vivian sat with the portfolio in her lap and her hands still, and watched the city move past the window and felt, for the first time in a very long time, exactly the right size. Chicago City Council chambers smelled like old wood and coffee from a cart in the hallway, and the specific formality of a room where things are decided. The gallery was full, television camera in the corner, aldermen at the dais. Robert was standing near the front with Henderson and 2 attorneys Vivian recognized and had, at various points, out-argued without anyone knowing it. She and Simone took seats in the 3rd row. Robert was mid-laugh when she sat down, and she watched him from across the room with her professional eyes. And she waited. The ceremony began, the Civic Builder Award, the lakefront development contract. A councilwoman named Patricia Osei stood at the podium and spoke about the project's legal architecture, the precision of the zoning language, the environmental framework, the liability protections that had made the city's legal team call it, and she used this word, exemplary. Robert nodded from his seat with the practiced modesty of a man receiving something he believes he deserves. Councilwoman Osei looked down at her notes. Then she looked up. "Before we enter the documentation into public record, I want to acknowledge something. Our office has spent the last 72 hours reviewing the authorship record on this project, following information provided to us by the Tribune." A pause. "The legal framework for this development was not produced by Harmon Development's contracted attorneys. It was produced by one person. Vivian Harmon, a licensed Illinois attorney whose bar certification has remained active and in good standing for 31 years. The room did not erupt. It shifted. The quiet kind of shift that means something has changed and everyone in the room knows it, and no one is quite sure yet what to do with that. Robert turned. He found her face in 3 seconds. She counted. 3 seconds in which he was still the man receiving the award, and then he was not. He stood up, he said her name, he said it the way he said everything, easily, with ownership, moving toward her already. "Vivian, she's my wife, she works with me, we do this together." "Robert." Councilwoman Osei's voice was even. "Please sit down." He sat down. Simone touched Vivian's arm once. Vivian stood. She walked to the podium. She set the portfolio on the lectern and looked out at the room and did not look at Robert. She spoke for 4 minutes. She was precise and she was calm and she cited dates and document numbers, and her voice did not waver because she had made this argument before, in other rooms, and she had always known how it ended when the evidence was sound. When she finished, she looked at Robert directly for the first time. "I didn't come here for you, Robert," she said. "I came here for my work." She picked up the portfolio. She left the podium. In the hallway outside the chambers, he caught up with her, and she stopped and turned and let him speak. He spoke for a while. She listened the way you listen to something you are putting down for the last time, hearing the full weight of it before you set it on the ground. When he finished, she said, "I'm not carrying this anymore." She walked out through the building's front doors and into the November air, and the cold hit her face, and the lake was 3 blocks east, and she kept walking. 1 year later, Vivian Harmon kept an office on the 14th floor of a building on North Michigan Avenue. The view was not as high as the apartment had been. She did not miss the height. She came in early, she made her own coffee, she set her bar card on the desk where she could see it, next to a framed copy of the Meridian Brief, and she worked until the work was done, and then she went home to an apartment that was the right size for one person. She saw Robert once, from a distance, outside a restaurant on Erie Street. He was with Henderson. He had a new suit. He looked smaller than she remembered, or maybe she had simply stopped adding her own dimension to him. She did not stop walking. The leather portfolio sat open on her desk every morning, a working document now, not a buried one. A tool, not a relic. Some things are not lost. They are only waiting for you to stop letting someone else decide what they are worth. And that is where I will leave you today. If Vivian's story stayed with you, if some part of it felt familiar, I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken? Have you ever made a trade that was never honored? Tell me in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you are new here, go check the playlist on your screen right now. There are stories waiting for you there that feel exactly like this one. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.